Hey friends, how you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tzadidal, Daf 94 of Masechta Yevamos. Friends, Daf 94. Well, the first part we talk about is one witness believed to permit a Yevama to marry some other fellow. What do you guys think? Okay, so I leave you with that opening question, and then we talk about what happens if the opposite happens. What do I mean? What happens if it's his wife who goes traveling, and then word comes back that she's in Wellwood, and then he marries her sister? I mean, here's his chance. So, and then she comes back, and things get awkward. So, we're going to discuss that situation also. Well then, without further ado, we're on Daf Tzadidal, about 8-10 lines into the page. Omer of Motchil Rav Ashi. You got it? So it says of Motchil to Rav Ashi. V'amri lei Rav Acha Rav Ashi. Okay, some say it wasn't Rav Motchil, it was Rav Ashi. Rav Acha. Okay, take your choice. Toshma, come in here. So a woman is not believed to say that her Yavam went to Wellwood so that she can now marry somebody else, right? So if you have Reuven married to Sarah, Reuven goes to Wellwood, so then now Sarah needs to do Yibum with Shimon. Shimon's nowhere to be found. So now what happens? So she is not believed to say that Shimon's also in Wellwood. Right? She'enasi said, I can marry some other guy. And she's also not believed to say that her sister went to Wellwood so that she could marry her husband, right? Meaning, right? So let's keep Reuven and Sarah are married, okay? So Rivka wants to marry Reuven, but she can't because Sarah is married to Reuven. Now Sarah and Rivka are sisters, right? And Rivka can't marry Reuven if Reuven's married to her sister Sarah. So Rivka is not believed to say that Sarah is gestorben, so that she can now marry Reuven. She would not be believed. Now, you ready for the proof? The argument. So we want to say, okay, well, Sarah is not believed to say that her Yavam is dead. Rivka is not believed to say that her sister is dead. Right? In these cases, they are not believed. They are not believed. But the important thing over here, an Eid Echad would be believed. Right? We're saying that they are not believed to testify about themselves to their own benefit, but an Eid Echad would be believed, i.e., an Eid Echad, an individual witness, would be believed to say that Shimon, the Yavam, is dead, so that Sarah can now go marry some other fellow. So which the Gemara says, hold your horses. That's what the Gemara says. The Taimich means hold your horses. So the Taimich, hold your horses. Ema Seifa. If I continue reading in that Brisa, a fellow is not believed to say that his brother is gestorben so that he can marry his sister-in-law. He's also not believed to say that his own wife is dead so that he could marry his sister-in-law, i.e. his wife's sister. Would we say in that case as well that the diuk is that sure, he's not believed to testify about himself, to testify that his wife is dead so he can marry his sister-in-law, or that his brother is dead so he can marry his sister-in-law? Should we say he's not believed about himself, but an Eid Echad would be believed? Obviously not. I understand why an Eid Echad is believed by a woman to permit her to be married to somebody else to prevent aguna. But there's no reason why we would ever trust an individual witness about a man to say that his wife is dead to allow him to marry his sister-in-law, or to say that his brother's dead to allow him to marry his brother's wife, also sister-in-law. Meaning, right? Obviously, the diuk in the Seifa about this guy would not be to say that an Eid Echad would be believed to testify about him. We would only ever consider believing in Eid Echad by a woman to allow her to get married, because otherwise she'll be an aguna. So therefore, we kind of throw out any kind of diuk proof to say from here that an Eid Echad would be believed to permit Sarah to get married to some other guy. This brisa is really only important according to Rabbi Akiva because since of course we know that according to Rabbi Akiva there is mamzer even from Chayvei Lavin. So therefore, for example, in the case of Yevamos, right? Reuven's married to Sarah, Reuven dies, so now Sarah needs to do Yibum with Shimon. So now if Sarah needs to do Yibum with Shimon. So now if Sarah were to, instead of do Yibum with Shimon, she were to marry some other guy, Yankel. She wanted to marry a guy named Yankel. So if she marries Yankel, so then according to Rabbi Akiva, the child would be a mamzer. Right? It's a lav, right? It says, right, Losia, Eisha Sameis, Achutz Lish Zar, Yevamo Yalel, something like that, right? I guess we've been learning like almost 100 pages of Yevamos. I should probably be familiar with that pasuk. What am I going to tell you? Anyways, what were we talking about? So, right, so if Sarah if she needs to do Yibum with Shimon, but she goes and marries some other guy, so that's a lav. But says Rabbi Akiva that if, a relationship of a lav, the child is a mamzer. So therefore, I might think, so therefore, I might think that according to Rabbi Akiva, since if Sarah marries some random guy, when she needs to do Yibum with Shimon, the child will be a mamzer, maybe there we can also assume that she is going to make sure that Shimon really is dead before she marries that other person to prevent the child being a mamzer. So maybe I would think that according to Rabbi Akiva, she would be believed to testify that her Yavam is dead, that Shimon is dead. Komash Malon. Therefore, we need this brisa to tell us that no, actually, she would not be believed about herself, even though if she marries some other guy, the child would be a mamzer. Still, she's not believed about herself. Rave Omer says, Rave, Eid Echad Nemon b'Yevamo mikal v'chomer. I could learn out from a kal v'chomer that one witness should be believed to permit a Yevama to marry some other fellow, right? So if you have, right, Reuven died, Sarah needs to do Yibum with Shimon. Shimon is nowhere to be found. So Rava says one witness would be believed to say that Shimon's also dead, and now Sarah can marry whoever she wants. One witness would be believed, and we can derive this from a kal v'chomer. Okay, Rav Omer Eid Echad Nemon b'Yevamo mikal v'chomer. I can argue that an Eid Echad is believed to permit essentially Sarah to get married to whoever she wants, mikal v'chomer, from a logical argument. Le'isur karis hitarta. Well, if you allow an Eid Echad by an isur karis, right? We allow an Eid Echad by Eishes Ish. We allow an Eid Echad to enable, right? If an Eid Echad comes and says that Sarah's husband died on his trip, so she's now allowed to marry somebody else. And that's Eishes Ish. That's an isur karis. The isur lav lo kol shekin. So then certainly when it comes to Yibum, which is only a lav, there's no chiyuv karis, right? Meaning, what are the stakes over here? Reuven died, Sarah needs to do Yibum with Shimon. If she goes and marries some other guy, it's a lav. So certainly an Eid Echad would be believed to say that Shimon's dead and she can marry somebody else. If he's believed to say that her husband's dead and now she can marry somebody else when it would be Eishes Ish, certainly the Eid Echad would be believed to say that Shimon is dead and she can now marry somebody else where it's just a lav. A certain rabbi said to Ravi, yeah, but we could prove otherwise from herself. To the isur kares itarta, the isur lav lo itarta. A certain rabbi challenged Rav and he says, I don't agree with your logic, because as we learned yesterday, right, a woman is believed to say that her own husband died and that now she can marry somebody else, which is a chiyuv kares. We believe her by a chiyuv kares, and yet we had just said that a woman is not believed to say about herself that her yavam died. So we see that, even when testifying about herself, we see that we trust her about herself with regard to Eishes Ish, which is chiyuv kares, and yet we do not trust her about herself to say that her brother-in-law died and that now she can marry whoever she wants, which would only be a lav. How come we don't believe her about that her brother-in-law is dead? lo daiku mitzvah, because since maybe she and Shimon don't get along, maybe she hates Shimon, and therefore she's not really going to do her research so much to make sure that he's really dead. So, right, meaning because the whole reason why we trust, or not necessarily trust, but why we allow an Eid Echad by Aguna is because she's going to do her own research, right? If she's wrong, we have all the chumras in the Mishnah, she's going to do her own research. But when it comes to Yibum, maybe she doesn't get along with her brother-in-law, and therefore she's not really going to do her research, so therefore we don't trust her. Eid Echad nami came to Zimnin Desanyale Lodaiku Mitzvah. So also by an Eid Echad, if one witness comes and says that her brother-in-law is dead, well, we need her to look into it and make sure that he really is dead. But maybe since she doesn't like him very much, she'll just be more relieved that someone is saying that he's dead and that she doesn't need to do Yibum. She won't really do her research properly. So therefore, I could argue against Rava's Kal V'chomer and say that here also, even by Neid Echad, we can't trust that she's going to do the requisite research to allow her to be sure to, right? So for her to be sure, or for us to be sure that she is sure that Shimon is really dead, to enable her to marry other people. Now, the Mishnah had ended with Zemedrash Darish Rabbi Elazar ben Masya v'chulei, right? So we had said that in a situation where, what was the situation that we're talking about? Right. Dude, what the heck was the situation? Excuse me, I need to look it up. Right. In the situation where they said that her husband died, so she went and she was Mekadesh a fellow. She got betrothed to a fellow. She didn't marry the fellow, she got betrothed to the fellow. And then it turns out that her husband is actually alive, so she can go right back to her husband. And even if the second fellow gives her a get, the get is irrelevant. And Rabbi Elazar ben Masya explained that this is because the pasuk says V'isha grusha be'isha v'lo me'isha eno isha, right? That by I don't know what the heck I just said, but right, even if he gives her a get, the get is irrelevant. She's not considered a grusha. She's not considered a divorcee, and she could still marry a kohen if her first husband dies, right? So the reason being that it says v'isha grusha me'isha and not grusha misha enu isha, right? In order for it to be considered a divorcee, she has to be divorced from her husband. But here, the second guy she was never married to, and right, she was an Eishes from the first guy. It was only kiddushin anyways, never nisuin, so she could just go back. That divorce is irrelevant. So now says Amr Rav Yehuda Merav Havle the Rabbi Elazar lemedrash bei magnisa v'darish bei chaspa. Says Rav Yehuda Merav that Rabbi Elazar ben Masya could have darshaned a much better, a pearl from that pasuk. Instead, he darshaned a piece of pottery which is not like a pearl. I think a marganisa is a pearl. Let me look it up quickly. Yeah, a pearl. Okay. My marganisa. So what is the pearl that he could have darshaned from this pasuk? The Tanya is within the Brayso of Isha grusha meisha afilo nizgarsha ela meisha psul lechehuna vanureach haget the pasuk bechuna. Friends, you hear this? Let's read it again. V'isha grusha meisha, a woman who is divorced from her husband, right? It says by a kohen that a woman who is divorced from her husband cannot marry a kohen. And we can darshan afilu lo nizgarsha ela meisha. Even if she is only divorced to her husband. What does it mean that she's only divorced to her husband? If her husband gives her a get and says, look, you are divorced from me, but here's the catch. You are not permitted to anybody else. You hear that? Usually the point of a divorce is that you're divorced from me and you can do whatever you want now. Marry whoever you want. Here this fellow says you're divorced from me, but you're also forbidden upon everybody else. So first of all, that get doesn't work. You can't divorce your wife only from you, but not allow her to be married to marry anybody else. So that get doesn't work, and they're still married. However, what that get does accomplish is that she cannot marry a kohen, right? It says by a kohen, it says v'isha grusha meisha. Even if she's only divorced to her husband, still, right? A situation where he says you're divorced from me, but you're not allowed to anybody else. So we say it's that get is irrelevant, and they're still married. But it does accomplish something, which is that even if he now dies and she becomes a widow, she'd be unable to marry a kohen on account of this get. And this is the scent of a get. It's not a real get because they remain married, but still there's a scent of a get, a shmek of a get. A shmef? A shmek. Shmek. Shmek, I think. So a shmek of a get. And therefore she's possible to marry a kohen. A shmek of a get. That's nice. Yeah. There's another funny Yiddish word that I learned the other day, but I'm going to save it for the right time. I'll bring it out when you're not expecting it, and I'll get you to laugh. Let's go weiter. Now, so now we get to new Mishnah. Givaldi. We get to new Mishnah, and in this Mishnah, things turn around. Up until now, we've been talking about where you have a woman whose husband goes traveling someplace, and they come back and say he's dead, and she marries somebody else. Here we're talking about where the wife went traveling someplace, and they come back and they tell the husband, your wife is dead. So what does he say? He says, Givaldig. Now I can marry your sister. So and then she comes back, and that's oof. Wow. What do you think that scene looks like? Probably very awkward. Very awkward. I'm married to your sister now. Let's go weiter. So, it says in the Mishnah, so you have a fellow whose wife went traveling someplace, and they came back and they said to him, and they said, well, your wife's in Wellwood. She says, Givaldi. And he marries her sister. And sure enough, his wife comes back. Well, she's permitted to go back to her husband. Okay. And he's permitted to, any of the relatives of the sister, such as a daughter or whatever. And the second wife would be permitted to his relatives. The second, when he married the sister, it was basically irrelevant, right? I mean, he was still, right? I don't know. Let's say Reuven, Sarah, and Rivka. Sarah and Rivka are sisters, right? So Reuven's married to Sarah. They say Sarah's dead. He marries Rivka. So, but it turns out Sarah's alive. So he's really married to Sarah the whole time, and the marriage to Rivka is really irrelevant. All right. If a Mesa Rishona, now if Sarah dies, Mutu B'Shniya, he can now marry Rivka. If Sarah now dies, so okay, he can marry Rivka, his sister. Once Sarah is dead. Amrlo Mesa Ishto Venosa Sachosa. What if they said to Reuven, look, Sarah is dead, so he marries Rivka. But then they come back and they say, wait, actually, Kayem is Hoisa Vamesa. We say, actually, no, we kind of made a mistake. When we said that Sarah was dead, she was actually alive. But now she's dead. Okay. Havalad Rishon Mamzer V'achrin Ein Mamzer. So in this case, if she had a child, if Reuven and Rivka had a child while Sarah was still alive, so that child is a mamzer. But if they had a child after Sarah died, so then the child is not a mamzer. Okay. Rabbi Yossi Omer says, Rabbi Yossi kol sheposa idei acher and posa idei atzmo. If he apostles somebody else, so he also apostles himself. And if he doesn't apostle anybody else, he doesn't apostle himself. We're going to have to, tomorrow we're going to have a very interesting time trying to understand what that means. So let's save that till tomorrow. It's complicated. It says the Gemara, so this is interesting. It's also taka related to what Rabbi Yossi says about being posel other people, being posel other people, and being posel himself, right? So let's understand what the Gemara just said. So the Gemara says, what if what if we add on to this case a shtickle? So let's say Reuven is married to Sarah. Sarah has a sister Rivka. Rivka is married to some guy named Shimon. Fine. Now, Sarah, Reuven's wife, goes on this trip with her brother-in-law Shimon. And then word comes back that Sarah and Shimon are both dead. Reuven then goes and marries Rivka, his sister-in-law. Turns out that Sarah and Shimon are alive. So in that case, we're going to say that Rivka is not going to be permitted to go back to Shimon. However, Sarah is going to be permitted to go back to Reuven. Right? So that's really inside. Even in a situation where Sarah and Shimon go traveling someplace, and then they get word that Sarah and Shimon are dead. And now, when Reuven gets married to Rivka, this marriage, the kamitzra eishes giso agiso, means that Rivka is not able to go back to be married to Shimon, but afilu hachi eishes giso asira. But even so, wait, what? The kamitzra eishes giso agiso, afilu hachi eishes giso asira ishto sharia. Right? So even so, Rivka is forbidden to Shimon, but Sarah remains permitted to Reuven. And we do not say mitoch shenesra eishes giso agiso. We don't say that. Well, since Rivka is also now to Shimon, te aser ishto olav, then Sarah should also be aser to Reuven. We do not say that. Okay, fine. So now, so let's say that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Akiva. How come? Rabbi Akiva havila achos grushaso shnoikis. So the Gemara wants to say, well, if the Mishnah was Rabbi Akiva, well, Rabbi Akiva would say that in this case, right, where Reuven hears that Sarah died on her travels, so he marries Rivka. Now, according to Rabbi Akiva, he would have to get a bill of divorce. He would have to give a get to Rivka. Now, if Reuven has to give a get to Rivka, then what does that mean for Sarah? Sarah is the sister of somebody who he divorced. He's achos grushaso. The sister, right? Sarah now becomes the sister of somebody who he divorced, and you can't be with achos grushaso. So that's the kash. Let's read that again. Let's say that the Mishnah is not like Rabbi Akiva, the Rabbi Akiva, because if it was Rabbi Akiva, havila achos grushaso, then Sarah would be unable to go back to Reuven, since she would now be the sister of Reuven's grusha. The Tanyas, we learned in the Brisa, kol harayos shebateira, right? We learned this the other day. Any of the rayos in the Torah, right? Fellow, chafes marries his daughter. Ain't tzrichas emenu get. You don't need a get from that. That's not, no marriage, doesn't need a get. Chutz me'eshes ish, shanises alpi bezdin. The only exception being, as we learned the other day, the case that we've been talking about, where you have, a man and a woman are married. He goes traveling someplace, and they say that he is dead. Right? A witness comes and says that he is dead. She then goes to Bezdin. Bezdin says, okay, you can get remarried. It turns out that he's alive. In that case, she needs to get a get from the person who she married. Rabbi Akiva adds, af eishes och, even the sister of your brother, v'achos isha, as well as the sister of your wife. And therefore, in this case, where the wife went traveling someplace, and a witness says that she's dead, Reuven then goes and marries her sister. When the wife comes back, when Sarah comes back, Reuven is going to have to give a get to Rivka. Now, if that's the case, that makes Sarah achos grushaso. V'cheven da'amar Rabbi Akiva ba'ya get, and since Rabbi Akiva says that he would have to give a get to Rivka, memele itzra ole, memele Sarah becomes also to Reuven, to havila achos grushaso, because Sarah becomes achos grushaso. Okay, but says the Gemara, not so fast. Rabbi Akiva would not necessarily say that in this case, Reuven would have to give Rivka a get, because Flavit Marla was not stated about it. Amr Gidol, Amr B'chi Bar Yosef, Amr Rav, Hay Eishes Och, Hey Chidami. What's the situation of the wife of your brother that needs a get? For example, if Reuven was Mekadesh, he betrothed Sarah, but didn't marry Sarah, and then Reuven goes traveling someplace, and then Shimon hears that his brother Reuven is dead, Ve'amad v'nosas ishto, so he then goes and does yibum with Sarah. The amrei inche, or he then goes and, or it doesn't say yibum, he then goes and marries Sarah. The amrei inche, what are the yentas going to say? Kama tanoa havale b'kiddushin. They're going to say, you know what happened? The yentas know everything. The yentas know that Ruvain was only betrothed to Sarah. And they're going to say, you know what happened? This is what happened. The yentas is going to say, I know exactly what happened. And everyone's going to listen intently, all the other yentas. And one of the yentas is going to say, this is what happened. Ruvain betrothed Sarah under a stipulation, some kind of a stipulation that wasn't met. I don't know what the stipulation was, but it wasn't met. And the reason why Shimon is now marrying Sarah is because since the stipulation of Ruvain was not met, Ruvain and Sarah were therefore never had any relationship, and Shimon is therefore now married to Sarah. Mamish married to Sarah. Ruvain had some kind of stipulation. The stipulation was not met. Shimon now married Sarah. And therefore, that's mamish, a marriage, and therefore they would need a get, right? If Ruvain comes back, I guess, they would need a get. Although, whatever it is, Shimon, right, is now married, and they would need a get. By Shapir Nosiv, and therefore Shimon, right, if Ruvain had some kind of stipulation built into the engagement that was not met, so then Shimon would be allowed to marry Sarah, and that is why they would need a get by the wife of your brother. And what's the situation of the sister of your wife? For example, Ruvain was betrothed to Sarah, and Sarah went traveling, and then rumor came back that she was dead. And Ruvain was betrothed to Sarah. Sarah goes traveling someplace. Word comes back that she's dead. Ruvain then goes and marries her sister Rivka. The Entis are going to say, that Ruvain had some kind of stipulation in his kiddushin with Sarah, and that stipulation was not met, and therefore they were never actually married in the first place. And Ruvain properly married Rivka, and therefore she would need a get. But in our Mishnah, where we're talking about Nisuin, where we're talking about when Ruvain and Sarah were mamish married, there's no reason to say that Ruvain would have to give a get to Rivka, no get necessary, and therefore, Rabbi Akiva would not say that in our Mishnah, Rivka would require a get, and therefore our Mishnah can even be Rabbi Akiva. But now, friends, you ready for this? Friends, I don't know if you're ready for this. You ready for this? Frekti Gemara, Amar Rav Ashi Rav Kahana, Rabbi Akiva. If the Mishnah is really Rabbi Akiva, les neinami chamoso. Well, then the Mishnah should also mention a case of chamoso, of his mother-in-law. Because we hear that according to Rabbi Akiva, Damar chamoso la'achamisa lav b'sreifa. The Rabbi Akiva holds that if Ruvain is married to Sarah and Sarah dies, Ruvain, if he marries his mother-in-law, he's not chayiv sreifa. So therefore, if that's the case, if it was Rabbi Akiva, so then we should also include a situation where Sarah goes on a trip somewhere, she dies, and then Ruvain marries her mother-in-law, his mother-in-law. The Tana is, we learn in a Braisa, Bo'esh Yisufu Oso Ve'esen, says the pasuk. Let's read the pasuk. V'isha sheikach isha ve'esima. A fellow takes a woman and her mother. The question is, who's this woman and mother? Is it talking about his wife and her mother? Is it talking about his mother-in-law and her mother? Zimahi, it's Zima. It's not appropriate. Bo'esh Yisufu Oso Ve'esen. You have to burn them, burn him, burn them. You can't have any Zima, any of this inappropriate stuff. So now it says, Bo'esh Yisufu Oso Ve'esen. You'll burn him and them. Oso ve'es achas man. Rabbi Shmuel says, es hen, as Rashi points out, that hein in Greek apparently means one. So ve'es hen means him and one of them. So according to Rabbi Shmuel, it means him and one of them. Rabbi Akiva Omer also ve'es shtein, whereas Rabbi Akiva says him and both of them. Now we're going to explain a machlokas, Abaye and Rava, about how to understand this pasuk. So bishlam ala Abaye. So I understand our Mishnah and why, even if it's according to Rabbi Akiva, we leave out his mother-in-law. Because Abaye understands this machlokas between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Akiva in the following way. That they're arguing about how to understand the implication of the pasuk. Rabbi Shimon savar chad ksiv, Rabbi Akiva savar tart ksiv. That Rabbi Yishmael, right, both Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael agree that you don't have, right, that when it says ish ki yikach es isha ves ima, right, when a person marries or has a relationship with a woman and her mother, and it says that you have to burn them, clearly it is not talking about his wife, because what did his wife do? His wife didn't do anything. He's allowed to marry his wife. Rather, it's talking about who's Isha v'ima, his mother-in-law and his mother-in-law's mother. Now, Rabbi Yishmael says that specifically this pasuk is talking about ve'es hen, burning only one of them. He actually learns out his mother-in-law's mother from a different Gezer Shava, but that's not important right now. It says Rabbi Yishmael, it says they have to burn, right, es hen, them, him and them. So es hen means es achas mehen, i.e. just the mother-in-law. We're not talking about the mother-in-law's mother right now. Whereas Rabbi Akiva says no, also ves shtein, both the mother-in-law and the mother-in-law's mother as well, you have to burn in addition to the fellow. So now, according to this, according to Abaye, nobody said anything about marrying the mother-in-law after the wife is dead. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a fellow's, right, Reuven's married to Sarah, and then he goes ahead and sleeps with her mother-in-law's, right, his mother's mother, right, i.e. Sarah's mother, Sarah's grandmother. So that is what the pasuk is talking about according to Abaye. Nothing to do with what if Sarah dies and then he marries her mother-in-law. That's not talking about that. So therefore, according to Abaye, nobody said anything about if Sarah dies and he marries the mother-in-law. Pasuk doesn't say anything. We're not talking about that according to Abaye. So therefore, there's no reason to assume that you could marry your mother-in-law after your wife dies. And therefore, yeah, the Mishnah doesn't mention your mother-in-law, because the pasuk is not talking about your mother-in-law. So again, B'shlam Abaye, I understand according to Abaye, Damar Mashmos Darshani Kibenayu, who says that the machlokas between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva is just about how to understand the implication of the pasuk. Rabbi Shmuel Sover Chadaksiv. Rabbi Shmuel says that we're only talking about sreifa for your mother-in-law, not your mother-in-law's mother. Rabbi Akiva Sover Tartiksiv. Rabbi Akiva says that no, it's talking about your mother-in-law and your mother-in-law's mother. So Shapir, so I understand why the Mishnah, even if it's going to Rabbi Akiva, the Mishnah leaves out Chamoso, your mother-in-law, because the pasuk, the Mishnah is because there's nothing wrong with marrying. Well, not what? No, it leaves out your mother-in-law because we have no reason to assume that you can marry your mother-in-law after your wife dies. The pasuk's not talking about that. But Ela l'Rave, according to Rave, but according to Rave, who says that the machlokas between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Akiva is regarding if your wife dies, are you chayiv streifa for marrying your mother-in-law? That Rabbi Shmuel says yes, because it's achas me'ed, right? Even if only one of them is alive, right? So according to Rave, when it says Isha v'ima, it is talking about your wife and her mother, and what it means is that Rabbi Shmuel says even if only one of them is alive, i.e. if your wife dies and your mother-in-law is alive and you marry your mother-in-law, so you'd be chayiv streifa. Whereas Rabbi Akiva says no, both of them have to be alive. That in order to be chayiv streifa, your wife has to be alive when you have a relationship with your mother-in-law, and then you're chayiv streifa. But if your wife is dead, so then you would not be chayiv streifa for marrying your mother-in-law. So if that's the case, so according to Rave, then if the Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva, so then you're not chayiv streifa for marrying your mother-in-law after your wife dies, and therefore we should include in the Mishnah, right, the situation where your wife got lost, people said she was dead, and you married your mother-in-law. That should be a situation that should come up in the Mishnah, to which the Gemara answers, right, so less ninami chamoso. So according to Rave, if the Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva, we should also mention chamoso. Amarle ni demiyata kra misreifa meisurim mimiyata kra. To which Rav Kahana responds to Rav Ashi, says, look, sure, according to Rabbi Akiva, according to Rava, Rabbi Akiva would say that you're not chayiv sreifa for marrying your mother-in-law after your wife dies, but that doesn't mean that it's permitted. It doesn't mean that it's right. It says meisurim mimiyata kra. Does the pasuk say that it's not going to be an isser? Of course it's an isser. You're still not going to be allowed to do it, so therefore the Mishnah is not going to talk about a case that you're not allowed to do. Okay, as opposed to like your sister-in-law, for example, you're allowed to marry your sister-in-law once your wife is dead, but that wouldn't apply to your mother-in-law. So we leave it out. All right, friends. Well, the daf started off talking about trying to bring a proof for to say that an eid echad would be believed to say that a woman is permitted to to say that a woman's yavam is dead and that she can marry whoever she wants. We tried twice to bring a proof, but we didn't succeed. And then we moved on to a case where a fellow's wife goes traveling someplace and she doesn't come back, and then he marries his sister-in-law, and then she does come back. So we are discussing that case. Okay, and then we were talking about maybe the Mishnah should not be Rabbi Akiva. We said it could be Rabbi Akiva. Then we said if it's Rabbi Akiva, maybe it should include Chamoso. To which we said that no, even if it's Rabbi Akiva, it would not include Chamoso. And we saw machlokas between Abai and Rava about how to. Well, we saw really machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel about how to understand the pasuk of that you burn osof eshen. Rabbi Shmuel says eshen means es achas mehen, only one of them. Rabbi Akiva says it means both of them. And we saw machlokas between Rava and Abai how to understand this machlokas. Abai says it's talking about is the chiv sreifa in this pasuk only referring to the mother-in-law, like Rabbi Shmuel says, or maybe it's the mother-in-law and the mother-in-law's mother, like Rabbi Akiva, right? Rabbi Shmuel says it's only one of them. Rabbi Akiva says both of them. Rava says it's talking about would you be chayiv sreifa for having a relationship with your mother-in-law after your wife is dead? Rabbi Shmuel says yes. Rabbi Akiva says no. Peace out, friends.